So I want you to imagine uh, just completely draining the wealth of your entire nation, like taxing your citizens into outright poverty and totally stalling your own economy.
Right, just absolute financial ruin.
Exactly.
Right.
And doing all of that just to win a conflict that at the end of the day leaves you vastly weaker than when you started.
Yeah.
You spend a fortune, you exhaust your people, and your grand reward is basically inheriting a broken landscape.
Which is, I mean, that is the very grim, very real mathematics of ancient warfare.
Yep.
We often have this really romanticized view of historical battles, like victory is just a matter of showing up with enough courage and raw
Right,
power.
like a movie montage.
Exactly. But the historical reality was, well, it was a logistical nightmare that could break an empire before a single weapon was even swung.
Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to really explore this profound framework of ancient strategy and warfare.
Yeah, we've got some fascinating concepts to unpack.
But the goal for you listening right now isn't just to learn history. We are extracting these ancient insights to see how they map, like perfectly onto modern scenarios.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically, how you can lead a team more effectively and why outsmarting an opponent with, strategic flexibility is always, and I mean always, infinitely superior to just relying on brute force.
And to truly grasp the weight of these strategies, we have to really ground ourselves in the intense environment of ancient China, which is where these ideas were forged.
Right, the context is everything.
It is, because this philosophy, it was born out of staggering, literally society-altering stakes. The thinkers behind these principles, they weren't, sitting in some abstract academic seminar.
They weren't just theorizing in a boardroom.
No, not at all. They were analyzing literal life and death on a massive, massive scale.
Well, let's talk about that scale, actually, because it completely recontextualizes how we even think about conflict.
It really does.
We aren't talking about local skirmishes here. Raising an army in this historical period meant mobilizing 100,000 mail-clad soldiers.
100,000. Just wrap your head around that.
It's unbelievable. And you have to feed them, right? You have to supply them, you have to move them. Plus, you're bringing along 1,000 swift chariots.
And another 1,000 heavy chariots.
Exactly. And you're packing enough provisions to sustain this essentially moving city over 1,000 lions.
Which, just for context, is roughly several hundred miles.
Right. And you're often dragging these supplies across entirely hostile terrain.
So the underlying mechanism of that effort is what we really need to look at, because moving an apparatus of that size, it costs roughly 1,000 ounces of silver a day.
A day.
Every single day. And that budget had to cover everything from the massive logistical requirements at the front lines all the way down to the endless stream of glue and paint and repairs for the armor and the chariot.
Wow. That's just a constant hemorrhage of cash.
Oh, it was. But the true cost wasn't just the silver, it was the mechanism of economic collapse back home.
Because you can't just manifest an army of 100,000 people out of thin air. You're pulling those people from somewhere.
We're pulling them directly from the fields.
Right.
The peasantry was conscripted not just to fight, but to, drive the supply carts and manage all that logistics.
Which means no one is farming.
Exactly. So while the government is taxing the citizens at this astronomical rate to pay that daily silver cost, the crops are simultaneously rotting in the fields because the farmers have all been drafted into the war effort.
That is brutal.
It really is. The historical accounts show that 3/10 of the peasantry's income would just vanish into this void.
And the government's own revenue would just completely crater alongside it, right?
Right.
Like losing 4/10 of its total wealth, just attempting to replace broken chariots, exhausted horses, shattered armor.
Yeah.
It was this vicious, compounding cycle of societal ruin.
Which brings us to the foundational premise of this entire ancient philosophy.
Lay it on us.
No country has ever benefited from prolonged warfare.
Never.
Never. If you rely on brute force and the conflict drags on, weapons grow dull, the state's treasure is emptied, and the morale of the troops is just completely extinguished.
And in that state of exhaustion, another competitor will inevitably spot your weakness and capitalize on it.
Exactly. Somebody else is always watching.
It fundamentally flips how we usually think about winning. Like, if prolonged conflict destroys the prize itself, then the acme of excellence cannot be fighting and conquering at every single battle.
No, not at all.
The ultimate pinnacle of strategy is breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting at all.
That's the gold standard.
Taking a state, an army, or a regiment whole and intact is the only true victory. Shattering it means you failed strategically, because now you're just left holding a pile of ashes.
Right, taking the prize intact requires preserving your own resources and preserving the value of whatever it is you're actually trying to win. And brute force simply cannot achieve that.
Which, I mean, this translates so seamlessly to the modern corporate environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, think about a company launching a massive, poorly planned brute force initiative. Let's say a highly aggressive hostile takeover, or like a vicious, prolonged price war, where a brand just slashes their prices to bleed out a competitor.
You see that all the time.
Right. And the mechanics are exactly the same as the ancient war. The company drains its operating budget, the internal teams are worked to the point of absolute burnout, the leadership is totally distracted.
Yep, yeah.
And even if they technically win and bankrupt the competitor, what do they get? They inherit a fractured industry with utterly destroyed profit margins.
And the aggressor becomes incredibly vulnerable in the aftermath. So if smashing the obstacle with a sledgehammer only leads to mutual ruin, you're forced to adopt a totally different approach.
Right. You have to cultivate infinite adaptability.
Yes, infinite adaptability.
So how does that adaptability actually function in practice?
Well, the philosophy breaks it down through the concept of tactical dispositions. It asserts this very clear boundary. To secure yourself against defeat lies entirely in your own hands.
Okay.
But the opportunity to defeat the enemy, that is provided by the enemy himself.
Oh, that's interesting. So you control your defense, but they dictate your offense.
Exactly. You build an invincible foundation through discipline, through systems and preparation, but you can't simply force a winning strike just because you want to.
Right.
You have to possess the patience to wait for the opponent to overextend or, to miscalculate or leave a critical gap.
And when that gap appears,
You exploit it through an endless combination of direct and indirect maneuvers. And the ancient thinkers, they loved applying natural metaphors to explain these mechanics.
like what?
Well, they observed that there are only 5 primary musical notes, right? But combining them creates more melodies than you could ever listen to.
Oh, I like that.
And there are only 5 primary colors, but their combinations yield infinite hues.
So in a strategic conflict, you really only have 2 methods of attack, right? Direct and indirect.
Right.
The direct method is engaging the problem head on, holding the opponent's attention, and pinning them in place. But the indirect method, the flanking maneuver, the unexpected angle, that's what actually secures the victory.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And the brilliance of this framework is that the direct and indirect, they flow into one another in this endless circle. Like a direct attack can suddenly become an indirect diversion.
And the ultimate expression of this fluid, adaptable strategy is water.
Be like water.
Be like water. The nature of water is to run away from high places and hasten downwards. It doesn't waste energy fighting a boulder in its path.
Right, it just goes around it.
Exactly. It seeks the path of least resistance and simply flows around it, leveraging gravity to do all the work.
So military tactics are urged to mimic that exact behavior.
Yeah.
You avoid what is strong, the high ground, the opponent's core competency, and you strike directly at what is weak. Just as water retains no constant shape, strategy has no constant conditions.
You mold your approach precisely to the shape of the terrain and the posture of the enemy.
But executing that level of adaptability, it requires you to manipulate what the opponent perceives about your shape.
Right.
Which is why the philosophy insists that all warfare is fundamentally based on deception.
It's all deception. When you are fully capable of attacking, you must present the illusion that you are unable. When you're operating right next to the competitor, you have to convince them you are miles away.
You have to control the flow of information to provoke the exact mistake you need them to make.
I do want to challenge this a bit, though. The perception of deception and, avoiding what is strong.
Sure.
Because to a lot of modern leaders, that sounds uncomfortably close to just running away. It sounds like avoiding the tough fight because you lack the grit to face it head on. I mean, it's a natural reaction to view avoidance as timidity. But the ancient perspective separates the two through the lens of discipline.
How so?
Think about it. Simulating chaos to trick an opponent requires absolute meticulous order. Think about the mechanics of baiting an enemy into a trap.
Okay.
To make a highly trained, lethal unit look like a chaotic, frightened mob, that requires immense internal control. Concealing true courage under the cloak of fear demands a massive reservoir of latent energy.
So it's calculated misdirection.
Precisely.
The concepts use the image of a falcon's strike, right?
Yeah.
The bird appears to be just gliding passively on the wind, looking almost aimless,
Right.
until that precise fraction of a second where it folds its wings and drops with devastating calculated force.
The passive gliding is the deception. The latent energy is what shatters the target. But pulling off that kind of synchronized, water-like flexibility brings us to the most difficult part of the equation.
Which is,
You cannot simulate chaos externally if your own ranks are actually chaotic internally. You need absolute, unwavering unity.
which places the entire burden of this strategy squarely on the shoulders of the leader.
Yes, completely.
If we're applying this to team management, the ancient principles isolate several constant factors of strategy. But the two most pivotal for a manager are what they call the moral law and the commander.
Right.
The moral law is essentially the alignment of the team. It's the invisible force that causes people to be in complete accord with their leader, willing to follow them into severe challenges without being paralyzed by the risks.
And cultivating that moral law is the sole responsibility of the commander. This philosophy defines the ideal leader not by their aggression, but by a very specific combination of traits.
Wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness.
Exactly. The leader is described as the bulwark of the state. If the defensive wall is solid and complete, the organization is strong. If the wall is cracked or defective, the organization is weak.
And the cracks in that wall usually come from bad management.
Oh, almost always.
The ancient wisdom is shockingly specific about how a leader can inadvertently sabotage their own team. One of the primary ways is by issuing ignorant commands,
Right, like demanding a team advance when they lack the resources.
or forcing a retreat when the team finally has momentum.
Another disastrous failure is employing officers without discrimination.
Oh, this is a big one.
It is. Promoting the wrong people into leadership roles out of ignorance of their actual capabilities completely fractures the moral law.
Because when a team sees incompetence being rewarded or placed in charge, it shakes their confidence in the entire system.
They become restless, they second-guess the strategy, and the momentum is lost entirely.
This ancient diagnosis feels incredibly relevant to modern corporate culture.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah. We often see management philosophies swing violently between two equally flawed extremes. On one hand, you have the purely metrics-driven environments, iron discipline, brutal key performance indicators, absolutely zero empathy or human connection.
The sledgehammer approach.
Right. And on the flip side, you have the overly indulgent, hyper-casual cultures where everyone avoids difficult conversations, accountability vanishes, and the focus is entirely on keeping people comfortable rather than actually achieving the mission.
And this ancient framework argues that both extremes lead to failure. It demands a very difficult, nuanced balance. It explicitly states that a leader must regard their soldiers as their children.
Wow. As their children.
Yes, you have to look upon them with the deep empathy and commitment you would give your own family. And in return, they will follow you into the deepest valleys and stand by you in the worst conditions.
So you build the human connection first. You prove your sincerity and your benevolence.
Right. But, and this is crucial, the ancient strategists immediately follow that up with a massive caveat.
What's the caveat?
If you are kind-hearted but completely unable to enforce your own commands, your soldiers become like spoilt children. You have attachment, but you have no authority, and a team of spoilt children is utterly useless for any practical purpose. They just won't execute the mission.
Threading the needle requires immense emotional intelligence.
It does.
If you try to enforce iron discipline before you have built trust and attachment, the team will simply rebel or disengage.
Yep.
But if you build that attachment and refuse to enforce the standards, the team descends into chaos. You must have profound empathy, anchored by unshakable accountability.
And that empathy is also what allows a leader to truly understand the psychology of their team. Cultivating unity isn't just a matter of handing out a list of core values.
Right, putting a poster on the wall.
Exactly. It requires a deep mechanical understanding of human energy and how the environment shapes behavior. These ancient leaders were obsessive students of moods.
They mapped out the cognitive depletion of their troops, didn't they?
They did. They observed that a soldier's spirit is sharpest in the morning. By noonday, their focus begins to flag. And by evening, their psychological state shifts entirely. Their mind is bent solely on returning to camp.
So they understood decision fatigue thousands of years before modern psychology even gave it a name.
Yes. A brilliant leader manages their own team's energy to avoid that exhaustion, while deliberately attacking only when the opponent is in that sluggish, late-day state of mind.
You don't just fight the physical enemy, you fight their psychological depletion.
Precisely.
And when you master that energy management within your own ranks, you generate something the ancients called combined energy.
I love this concept.
It's so good. Instead of demanding heroic, exhausting efforts from single individuals, a clever leader builds a system where the momentum of the group carries the weight. The metaphor they use is brilliant round stones rolling down a steep mountain.
Right, because if a stone is square, it starts. If it's on level ground, it just sits there. The leader's job is to shape the team into a round stone and engineer the steep slope.
And once the stone is tipped over the edge,
It rolls with devastating, unstoppable force, powered by gravity rather than the endless pushing of the leader.
so the environment does the heavy lifting. But how do you engineer that slope? Like, how do you force a diverse group of individuals to act with that kind of singular momentum?
Well, there is a profound historical example in this philosophy regarding the men of Wu and the men of Yu.
Okay, tell me about them.
These were two groups with deeply ingrained historical hatred for one another. They were literal mortal enemies.
Right.
Yet the philosophy observes that if the men of Wu and the men of Yu are crossing a wide river in the same boat and they are suddenly struck by a massive, life-threatening storm, that deeply rooted hatred evaporates instantly.
Wow.
They will immediately come to each other's assistance, cooperating as naturally as the left hand helps the right.
Because the shared existential threat completely overrides their personal conflict.
Exactly. The storm creates an environment where cooperation is the only logical path to survival. And this observation leads to one of the most intense psychological tactics in the entire philosophy, deliberately putting your team on desperate ground.
Desperate ground, right?
Why? When an ancient army invaded deep into hostile territory, a commander would sometimes make a deeply counterintuitive decision. After crossing a river, they would intentionally burn their own boats and smash their own cooking pots.
Right. They trap their own people. They intentionally remove the safety net.
They do. By removing the possibility of retreat, they strip away the distracting illusion of a backup plan.
That is wild.
But it works. When there is no place of refuge, human beings stop worrying about survival and redirect all of that cognitive energy into fighting. When there is no escape, they stand firm and put forth their absolute uttermost strength.
Translating this to modern business leadership is fascinating because obviously we aren't literally trapping employees or, creating toxic fear-based culture.
No, please don't burn the office coffee machine to motivate people.
Right, don't do that. Burning the boats in a corporate context is about engineering shared inescapable stakes.
Yes.
Think about a massive company plagued by departmental silos where the sales team is constantly at war with the product team, pointing fingers, arguing over budgets.
Ah, the Wu and the Yu in the corporate boat.
Exactly that dynamic. But if a highly disruptive competitor suddenly enters the market with a superior technology that threatens to bankrupt the entire company, that is the storm.
Right.
A smart leader leverages that existential threat. You tie everyone's success to a single massive goal that can only be achieved through total cooperation. When the boat is sinking, those departmental silos collapse overnight because the alternative is everyone losing their jobs. You align the incentive so fiercely that the only way out is through, together.
It creates a focal point that standard daily management simply cannot replicate. You place the team in a posture where relying on one another isn't just a nice cultural value. It is an absolute necessity.
And all of these mechanisms, understanding the psychology of the team, managing their energy, engineering shared stakes, they funnel up into the most enduring summary of this ancient wisdom.
If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles.
It's so powerful.
The causality there is absolute. If you possess clarity about your own internal strengths and weaknesses, but you are blind to the enemy, your victories will be matched by your defeats. And if you lack clarity on both fronts, you are guaranteed to succumb in every single engagement.
It demands complete awareness.
Yeah.
Knowing your team so well that you can balance parental empathy with iron discipline. Knowing the terrain so well that you can act like water flowing around obstacles rather than smashing into them with a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
But there is one final critical piece to this framework. It's the actual mechanism that makes all of this clarity possible, and it's the one thing modern leaders frequently ignore just to save a little time or money.
Foreknowledge.
Foreknowledge.
The ancient thinkers argued that entire nations could face off in a grinding stalemate for years, striving for a victory that will ultimately be decided in a single pivotal day.
Right.
Because of those stakes, remaining ignorant of the enemy's conditions simply because you grudge spending a little silver to gather intelligence, that is considered the height of inhumanity.
The height of inhumanity. That is a severe condemnation of leaders who try to guess their way through complex problems.
It really is.
This philosophy insists that foreknowledge is the singular tool that allows a wise leader to achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary management. And they are very clear about how you get it. You cannot intuit foreknowledge from spirits or ghosts, meaning you can't just trust your gut feeling.
Yep.
And you cannot reliably deduce it from past experiences because the terrain is always shifting. You have to actively go out and extract it from people who understand the current real-time conditions.
You have to invest resources in intelligence. In ancient terms, that meant paying spies, rewarding local guides, and funding scouting missions.
Yeah.
The leader who refuses to pay for that intelligence, who marches blindly into the market hoping to just adapt on the fly, is gambling recklessly with the livelihood of their entire organization.
Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you to carry forward. Look at the challenges in your own career, your leadership role, or your business. Are you stubbornly marching forward in the dark, trying to save a little budget by skipping the research?
Are you swinging a sledgehammer at a brick wall, hoping the obstacle breaks before your team does?
Or are you actively spending the silver to cultivate the foreknowledge you need so you can win the battle before it even begins?
Are you relying on the exhaustion of brute force? Or are you prepared to flow like water?
When the landscape is shifting and the stakes are real, a sledgehammer is just a liability. You need strategy. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.